Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Level Up podcast, where we are talking with people that have gone from agent to entrepreneur. And today we've got a great guest from the Century 21 family with Century 21 Masters in Long Beach, California, Ms. Melinda Elmer. Melinda, welcome to the podcast. I really appreciate you hopping on here.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, so it looks beautiful in the background. That's not a poster, right? That is sunny California right now?
It is, definitely.
Oh man, looks awesome. So for those in the audience that may not know who you are, Melinda, can you just kind of bring us up to speed, give us a little bit of background on how you got into the business? I know you've been in for a while, and kind of what you started with and what you've grown that to.
Sure. Yeah. I've been in the business for about 17 years. I started in 2003. And, now this year, my goal is to do 100 transactions. And when I first started, I was actually a theatrical stage manager, and I really wanted to buy a house. So knowing nothing about real estate, I thought to myself, I was making less than $30,000 a year. I thought I couldn't afford to pay an agent and buy a house. I had very little money saved, but I had enough that I could probably do an FHA loan. And in fact, I actually talked to a real estate agent, and they told me I should buy a condo. And I didn't want to buy a condo. I really wanted to buy a house. So I started looking on some of the, internet was still relatively new at that point.
Sure.
I started looking on a lot of the websites, and I found the HUD Home website and started looking on there, but I couldn't make offers on properties because I wasn't an agent. So I thought, well, I'll solve that problem. I'll go get my license. I can start making offers on properties and buy them and live in them and fix them up and then resell them. So basically, I thought I'll be a flipper, right?
Yeah.
With no
Start
money.
with my own.
Right. Start with my own, live there and do it over time, and then be able to move and build some money there, because it was really the only way I could see in Southern California to be able to buy a property in less than $30,000 a year.
Sure.
So based on that, I called a bunch of real estate offices. 2 people called me back. One of them, I went in, they set me up with my online class. Now I was still working my theater job at the time. So while I was getting my license, I was just doing that and still working in the theater as a stage manager. And then I got my license. But as I was taking classes at the real estate school in the mornings before my other job, I started seeing some similarities between what I was doing as a stage manager and being a real estate agent. And that taking people through a really challenging process and making sure that the communication was there, all of those things appealed to me. So the thought of buying a house and flipping it kind of went to the wayside, and it shifted more towards, hey, there's a lot of similarities between the two, and I have more potential to be able to grow and make money and all of that. Mm-hmm. Initially, I was doing both jobs. I was going into the real estate office in the morning and then going to my theater job in the afternoon into the evening. My very first transaction was my brother, and he bought a property.
Thanks, bro.
Bought a condo. Thank you. And I remember I got my first check, and it was like $2,000, and I said, that's it. And I had worked for like 6 months basically to get that $2,000 check, between the splits and then paying another mentor agent, all of that other stuff. I was blown away at how little I made in that time frame. I could do more by stage managing actually at that level. So then luckily, one of my title reps introduced me to Mike Ferry, and I went to a Mike Ferry action workshop and sat in the very last row. It just sucked it all up. I said, oh my gosh, this is exactly what I needed. Everyone else in my office was going out and buying pies or pumpkins, and I was making less than $30,000 a year, which is in Southern California below poverty level. Mm-hmm, yeah. So I really did not have any money extra other than food and rent and car payment to be able to go spend on marketing or any of those things. So it was so nice to have somebody give me a system that I could use that didn't require me to go buy postcards, didn't require me to go buy a bunch of stuff to give to people who I didn't know anyway. Mm-hmm. I knew very few people that could afford to buy anything because all my friends were theater people, and they also were poor for the most part.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just started following the Mike Ferry system, got on the phone, started calling people. And initially I really like ran back to the back of the room and said, I want to sign up for coaching. And they said, do you have any money? I said, no. So I actually borrowed a little bit of money from my dad to get started and signed up for the base level coaching just so that I could get my feet wet. And then in my next 6 months with Mike Ferry, I was able to get 12 transactions going through my first year and 6 transactions fairly quickly within the first 3 to 4 months. So as soon as my first commission check was closing, I bumped up my level of coaching, and I've been in the full level of coaching ever since.
Wow, that's great. So the couple of things I want to just make sure that people caught there that I think are really important for anybody that's listening, that maybe you're newer in the business, or maybe they're just kind of stuck in the business, and the principles that you just laid out at the beginning of your career always stay true. So one of them is, when you started, you realized pretty quickly that you needed something to follow. You needed some sort of system to follow, because even when you started, it's much different now than in 2003. But even back then, there was a lot of different ways that people were saying, follow this system, do this farming. You were in a prospecting environment with Mike, and there was all these different things. So you chose one that worked for you and went with it. And the other part is, you didn't come into the business with a bankroll to all of a sudden just start going and spending money on marketing, even properties, much less yourself and your brand at that point. But you had one very important thing. You had your time.
Mm-hmm.
So you were willing to invest your time, which, in the generating and the prospecting game, that's what you're exchanging. And people will find out as we continue to talk what that's allowed you to build. So I think those are two really, really important points. So when a theatrical stage manager, what is that? Because I've got a hallucination of what it is, but I want you to tell me what it is.
Basically, in the pre-performance section, we run rehearsal. We would organize all of the props, costume pieces that we would need for rehearsals, communicate what was happening with the director to the periphery, the costume, lighting, all of those people, what they wanted to do and create. So we were kind of like the hub of communication.
Okay.
We brought all the people together. We ran the nuts and bolts of rehearsals, but we took notes. We had a book that showed what was happening and where everybody was, so that if we had one actor who was sick, we could bring another actor in and be able to put them into that show without a director necessarily present.
Okay, got it. So my hallucination was, and that's a lot bigger than what I was thinking. My hallucination was, you're kind of coaching the actors, which I thought was a great parallel to what our business is. I've always said, if you're a great real estate agent, if you're a really great listing agent, then you are always on stage. You are an actor. You have a performance to give when you're working with buyers and sellers. But I can see even more so with what your role really was. You were kind of the conductor. You were kind of keeping the whole thing rolling, which obviously translates really well when you're dealing with all the different types of people that we deal with in this industry.
Yeah, there was a lot of problem solving involved, figuring out how this was going to get to here and this was going to get to here, and dealing with different egos and personalities, and very quick on your feet thinking, as well as long-term thinking and planning ahead. So a lot of varied skills.
So you got in, you started doing some deals. You got, I would imagine, you got stabilized. Within a year or two, you had replaced your income from the theater position?
Oh, definitely. I tripled it. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you tripled that. So now you're stabilized, and you're going, okay, that's something I used to do. Now I'm good to go on the real estate thing. What kind of switched in your mind when you started realizing the opportunity that where, maybe doing 12 or 20 deals wasn't going to suffice, and you decided, okay, I'm going to really see what I can do and start growing this business? How did that come about?
I think a lot of it had to do with my exposure. Because I was around all of these amazing other agents at Mike Ferry events. And I went religiously to all of these events. I really was exposed to people who were doing 200, 300 transactions a year. And I thought, wow, I'm capable of so much more. Um, and once I started hitting 20, 25 transactions, I started bringing in additional support, even if on a part-time basis. But that I saw how that I could maximize my efficiency by having people do things that they were really good at, and
Mm-hmm.
let me do what I was good at, which was finding the business, presenting, negotiating, all of those things, but then allowing the minutia stuff that really takes a lot of time to be done
Mm-hmm.
by other people, whether it's a transaction coordinator or eventually an assistant, when I hired an assistant.
Yeah, yeah, I agree 100%. I can see that. I remember my first superstar retreat that I went to I was 8 weeks in business,
Mhm.
and when I walked in there, after about the fourth day of hearing all the stories and the people at that time that were doing hundreds of transactions and they're netting $1 million, and I'm going, wow, I know they at this point know a lot more than I do, but they don't look a lot different. They don't act a lot different. They told stories about how they sat there at one point and were the new person. And so that normal that you surround yourself with is either going to be normal that's going to help you grow, or it's going to be normal that's like it's going to keep you down. It's going to keep you from being able to grow. It's just the environment that you surround yourself with.
Absolutely.
So you started in 2003. So we had probably a good 4-year run, maybe 4.5-year run, and then 2008 happened.
Right.
Your market is one of extremes, and I would say compared to the rest of the country, probably shorter cycles. So you guys have in between the national cycles, you guys have some local ups and downs and stuff like that. That I'm sure clearly you're still here talking to us in 2020. So you've survived those and grown. What do you attribute that staying power to, for people that are out there that are kind of wondering if they're newer, or they're like, man, I don't know if this market doesn't hold forever that we're in, what do I do then? What would you give them as some advice to be able to maintain that?
I actually felt I think it's harder to do business in an upward trending
I
market,
I agree.
because there are more agents getting in, because the perception is that it's easy, because the market is going up.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to do anything for the sellers' values to be going up in their properties.
Yeah.
It just goes up automatically. What's harder, and what I felt like those 2003 to 2008 years actually prepared me for, was that I had been learning the expired scripts. I had been learning all of those things. And I felt like in some ways I was struggling more because I was more prepared for a downward trending or flat market
Mm-hmm.
than I was for that upward trending market. And I had to learn in the upward trending market to be more flexible with pricing, because
Yeah.
if I looked at the comps, the next house was going to sell for $20,000 more.
Yeah.
And if I told the seller that they weren't going to get that price, they just didn't list with me.
Yeah.
So
You're losing
it
listings and they turn around and sell 90 days later.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So 'cause the prices would just go up and catch up to wherever they were going to be. So I had to learn that what Mike taught us was more for a flat market or a descending market, the way that I was interpreting it when I first started. So when the market shifted, I was excited because I finally could practice what I've been learning and practicing for so many years.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
actually my business really skyrocketed because I really went after expireds, and was able to help a lot of those people who were being told by other agents, oh, you can still price it here. But if they priced it here, they would lose 20, 30, 40, $50,000 in a couple of months,
Yep.
because they were sitting on the market watching their equity erode.
Yeah. No doubt. From 2000, I remember 2000, late 2008 through 2012 or 13 in our markets, it was like trying to catch that falling knife. You had to anticipate where the price was going to be, not be going off of any past comps you were too late on. Like it was already gone, and now you're costing the seller money. And those are tough conversations. But
Yeah.
you're right. It's tougher to grow in in an upward trending market. I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. This is one of those things where, like right now, if you are a new agent or newer agent in the last 3 or 4 years, you've only seen a good market. So
Right.
there's a really great advantage that you need to understand. And that is the advantage of what Melinda just said. Value proposition to the sellers right now is that you have a license and that you can present well enough to be on the same page as the other people. For a lot of sellers, that's it. And so that's great, because as a new person that comes in today, the field's been level. Like, you've got the opportunity to come in and learn the skills and really take off, because the sellers aren't so discriminating on what they're going to hire. For those that have been in the market for a while, then understand there will come a time that if you don't learn your skills, then the market's going to change. Whatever it becomes, it's going to change and be different than today. And you have to be prepared. Otherwise, that's when they really start looking for the skills. And if you don't have them, then you're going to lose out. And that might be the new person that came in and chose to learn.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
They can out hustle you.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And they come in hungrier.
Right.
No doubt about it. So, tell me a little bit about what your team looks like now.
So I have a buyer's agent and an assistant who just went full-time about 1.5 years ago. And I have a transaction coordinator who for the last 9 years has been off-site, been a virtual transaction coordinator. But we just are making the transition to having a in-house transaction coordinator dedicated just for us, part-time.
Okay, got it. And so is that something that you started once you realized that, okay, I'm trying to scale the business up and I need to become more of a specialist, or what was the first move that you made when you started building that out? Was it somebody administrative or production?
Yeah, the very first thing that I did was when I probably got to about 30, 32 transactions. I had a transaction coordinator from day one. So I always used a transaction coordinator in the office. And then I eventually started hiring my own, but they were always kind of off-site people or independent transaction coordinators after that first initial transaction coordinator in the office. She spoiled me the first one because she was great. She would really, we would meet once a week and we would go through all the updates, and then she would take care of all the follow-up in between. So I really had a very high expectation of all my transaction coordinators after that. But then, like I said, then I've just had somebody who's very off-site and we meet once a week, or if they get a phone call from me, it's usually because there's something very urgent. I let them do their job. That's the goal anyway, is to let them do their job. I don't need to handhold them the whole way. If I need to send them information, I'll send them information, but otherwise, I just let them do their thing. I hired my first assistant when I was doing about 32 transactions a year, because I found that things like my database was getting neglected. I found that I was spending more time on things that somebody else could be doing. So I hired an assistant part-time at that point. And then as I started ramping my business up more, they came on more as I was getting into the 50 transactions a year range, that they were full-time at that point.
Yeah.
And then at some point in there, I ended up splitting because my assistant started doing some buyer's agent type duties. So then we ended up getting them licensed, and that kind of transition kind of happened gradually. And most of the time it was that they weren't showing property necessarily, but they were able to go and do the inspections and the appraisal, which, as you can take a long time.
Yeah.
An inspection can take several hours, which can be better used me doing something else. So that's where I started to see that I needed someone who could come and do that. As I was getting into the 45, 50 transactions, I really needed to hand that portion of things off. So then that happened, and then I hired a part-time assistant again. So then I just had the buyer's agent, the part-time assistant, and of course the TC. So that's kind of how that built a little bit organically. As my business started to grow, things would shift and change. And now we're going through another shift and change, because I see that I'm starting to jump back into doing more follow-up on things because the TC isn't here, or I need to go do things because we need somebody here, or my assistant's going out to do stuff that could be done, that we need an additional person here
Yeah.
instead of a person who's far away. So it'll just make it more efficient for us.
Do you focus primarily on listings then?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, good. You mentioned where you transitioned and said, I need some help. And I think this is really, really, really important point. You said around 30, 32 transactions when you're on track for that, right? And it was primarily because the time that you were doing income generating things started getting impacted. You were starting to do some of the servicing side, right?
Right.
So that's across the board. That 20 to maybe 30, 35 transactions, kind of maximum density. And that's for somebody, in my opinion, if you're listing heavy, if you're working primarily buyers, it might be even sooner than that, because the buyers might be so front end loaded on the time, showing properties, drive time, things like that. And it's not, a lot of times people, I believe, they wait and they make the decision of when I can afford it. And that can expand that time that you're in, just that drudgery. The worst part of my business, though not the worst, but the toughest part of my business, was in the year when I was trending about 40 properties and hadn't hired anybody yet, because you are doing everything, and now you're running this roller coaster. So you run, you create a bunch of business, and now you're servicing it all, and everything stops. And then you run. And I can remember Greg telling me 6 months before I hired somebody, you better hire somebody. It probably cost me 15 deals in the 6 months that I hadn't hired somebody, until it dawned on me, he's right, I am late to the game on this. And so when then you make that move, the critical part is, it sounds like you made the move, but then you went back and reinvested the time that you saved into doing what you were supposed to be doing, which is going and generating new business.
Right. Well, I mean, when you hire an admin, it's scary because you're now committing to paying this person money that you may or may not have. And there may be months where you don't have that income, where you have to take a little bit of a loss. So there have been a few times in the past where I haven't taken a salary for a particular month or whatever. But it's definitely scary. But I find that every time I do bring on somebody new, it causes me to reinvest my time back into prospecting more, so that I can find that business and support that. So because I know that I have to pay that, I don't have the option of paying payroll.
The times that I've seen bringing on staff or bringing on systems, because both staff and systems are designed to give you your time back. And if you reinvest your time in income generating activities and things that are going to affect the bottom line, that's an investment, because you can see a return off that investment. But when people invest in time or in systems and staff, but then they don't reinvest their time, it becomes an expense. And that's when it doesn't work, and they declare, well, this didn't work. But it's instead, when they hired that staff, they just said, well, man, this is great, I don't have to do this stuff anymore. And then they went and played golf, or they went and did something else. It doesn't change what you have to invest. It just allows you to get a return from it. And I think that's one of the points where when people invest in that and then they don't go and get a return from it, it's just an expense line of the P&L.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So what do you have? You said you have a goal of 100 transactions. What's it going to take? We're in February right now, first week of February 2020. Everybody is, I would imagine, if there's one part of the year that they're focused entirely on hitting that year's goal, it's the first quarter, hopefully. So what do you have to do in order to hit that goal? What are one or two of the things that you've got to accomplish, or your team's got to accomplish, to be able to get to that goal?
The biggest thing is getting back to the basics of everything. So we're kind of going through a process of reevaluating our systems to make sure that we're streamlined and efficient in each of those systems, especially bringing on a new staff person. It's a great opportunity to do that. And then really keeping my focus on prospecting, presenting, practicing the scripts, and going out and previewing property, so that I can really minimize that. I like to think of our staff as kind of like a doctor's office. I'm the doctor, and then we've got the nurses, and we've got everybody has their own specific task. And the more that everybody does their own specific task, the more efficient we can be able to bring in those that create that business. So really fine tuning and honing in on each person doing their task to the best of their ability so that we can grow there.
Got it. So you got the specific people doing their things. And for somebody listening right now, go through your responsibilities again. You get everybody trained up, if everything's running, if life's as good as it gets on your team, what are you, Melinda, doing on a daily basis? What are your responsibilities?
Prospecting.
Okay.
Going on appointments.
Okay.
Presenting. Previewing properties so that I know my inventory, so that when I go on an appointment, I have the confidence to know exactly how much that home is going to sell for. And then practicing my scripts on a regular basis. So role playing, I do a live listing presentation. We review it every week. That's what ideally in the world my job would be. Perfect. Not doing a lot of the other stuff.
So do you have, as the rainmaker, the team leader, do you have more responsibilities now in your year that you're going to hit 100 transactions than you did when you were, say, doing 15 or 20, or are you actually doing less than you were when you were doing 15 or 20 deals?
When I was doing 15 and 20 deals, I was doing everything.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was responsible for every little piece of it. So I think I have less responsibilities. They're just more fine-tuned.
Yeah.
But I am still responsible for the whole entity, the whole team.
Yeah.
And so, for example, on the weekends, if somebody else is off on my staff and I need to get something done right away, I'm still going to have to do it. Mm-hmm. So that still happens, but less so, because it's about weeding through the urgency. A lot of other people like to create urgency for us, and we have to decide what our urgency is and what does need to be done right then, or if it's something that can wait until Monday morning when we're back in the office.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of people like to create fires for us otherwise, but just filtering through that and saying, okay, this is what's important to do right now. This is what's important to do later. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And I go back to your example of the doctor. You see yourself as the doctor's office, and the doctor on Sunday afternoon will go in. If the office is on fire, he's going to go meet the fire department. It's just going to be what he needs to do. But on Tuesday afternoon, if somebody comes in and has a problem with their bill, the doctor's not handling that. And that's where you had this set up as. And for anybody that's out there that's trying to grow and has in the back of their mind, which is logical, it just isn't true. It's logical to believe I'm going to have to work harder. I'm going to have to take on all this stuff in order to grow my business. There's a portion of time where, yes, you do have to take on more things and you have to bear down and grind your way through it. But on the other side, where Melinda is right now, then the job actually gets easier. It's easier to do 50, 60, 80, 150, 200 transactions than it is to do 25 or 30.
100%. I mean, my friend Lee Marcus, I don't know if you know him, but he said that the business gets easier the more you do. More business comes to you, the more business you do. Yeah. So the reputation that you build, all of those things, people will call you more the more business that you're doing. Yeah. 100%. I used to make calls and I would have to talk to 200, 250 people to get an appointment. Yesterday, I talked to 33 people and I made 3 appointments. So it's a very different place and the skill level is higher. All of those things have been an accumulation effect for the last 17 years to get to where we're at. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's I think that's one of the challenges when people come into business. They may observe you. There's probably somebody watching you and going, but 30 contacts, and she set 3 appointments and went and took 2 of the 3 listings, and she could add the 3rd one, but it was way overpriced, so she turned it down. They're going, okay, well, I'm 3 weeks in the business. If I just talk to 25 or 30 people, I'll be good. Well, there's a big gap that you didn't see what Melinda was doing, and that compounds over time, like you said, to where now that kicks in, about the same time as your skills are off the chart. And now you can, 10% of the people that you're talking to, you're setting an appointment with, and you're listing probably 75, 80% of them.
Right. And I think that that can be frustrating for newer people. They
Sure.
see more experienced people just rocking and rolling, but they don't see all the sweat. I mean, I used to role play and practice an hour in the morning and an hour in the afternoon every day
Yeah.
when I was new, because I knew that I needed to ramp up really quickly, because I needed to have a paycheck or I was going to be out on the street.
Yeah.
So I had a lot of checkbook motivation when I first started, and I'm really grateful that I had those systems and somebody could tell me what to say so that I could practice those things and role play those and learn them to the best of my ability to grow faster.
Got it. Awesome. Well, as we kind of wrap up here, anything else in terms of that you'd want to leave it with the group that you think is really important that they know based on what you've already learned? You've kind of gone ahead. You're the scout. Now you're going back to your folks behind you and saying, "Listen, do this or don't do this." What would it be?
I would say keep it simple, don't overcomplicate things, and have patience with yourself, so that most people give up right before they're about to succeed.
Yeah.
So if you continue, I know that even when I was more successful and doing well, there were certainly time periods where I thought, am I really in the right field? Should I really keep doing this?
Yeah.
It would just, usually those moments is right before you're about to have a big breakthrough. So keep on plugging and you can make it happen if you want it.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. There's a great book out there if for those listening, if you haven't already read it, it's called 3 Feet from Gold. And that's the principle is most of us stop right before we get the return and the payoff. And with as many shiny objects as we have in this industry, it's easy. You spend a couple months doing this, it didn't work. 2 months doing this, it didn't work. Finally, the year's over, nothing worked, and you're out of business. Keep at something that works for you, that you're comfortable with. Find out who you're going to listen to and make sure they've already done what you want to do first before you start listening to them. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
And pick one thing. Don't keep bouncing around.
Yeah.
If you keep bouncing around, that's just going to get confusing.
Absolutely. Well, this has been great, Melinda. I appreciate you sharing so much and being so open. And if anybody wants to get a hold of you out there on the West Coast in Long Beach and send you some referrals or hit you up for some East Coast prospecting or East Coast role playing after they're done prospecting and you're just getting to the office, how do they get a hold of you?
You can reach me at 562-316-2915 or melinda@theelmerteam.com.
Awesome. And I appreciate that again. And for those of you that are listening, please go ahead and subscribe to the podcast. Leave us feedback, good, bad. We like all feedback. It helps us get great guests like Melinda on here. And as always, you can reach out to me on Facebook through Messenger or Instagram. And until the next one, I appreciate everybody tuning in. And Melinda, thanks again so much. We really enjoyed it.
Absolutely. Thank you.